All right, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in YouTube land. My name is Glenn Trahan. It is Alan Brunacini Friday, so we wear our Hawaiian shirts. We are talking today about defensive control techniques when a hazardous material response is needed from emergency responders. There are 13 different techniques that we're going to discuss today. If you are an emergency responder, I encourage you not only learn about these different techniques with the video and in your hand-to-hand on-site practice, but you also practice with your crews so that you can become proficient in these. Let's just jump right into this. The very first one that we're going to talk about is damming. Now, one of the things that I try to make sure that my firefighters know, my responders know, is that there are different kinds of dams. And when we talk about dams, I want you to think about when beavers dam up a creek, that little creek stops flowing and backs up. And then that little creek turns into a big pond and maybe bigger. When we as responders put a dam in place, we have the potential of creating a large pool when we stop that flow. We need to make sure that we're ready for that. There are ways that we can minimize the effects of that pool on anything nearby. Because if that creek that we're damming is an MC306 dumping liquids into a ditch off of the road or into that ditch from however it is, and we stop that flow and that ditch fills up, is there a house or a commercial entity adjacent to that ditch that could be impacted? That becomes much more of an issue when we have water in that ditch. When we have water anywhere that we put a dam, just like when the beavers dam it, we stop the flow of water, we create a pond. If that liquid can float on the water, now I've just taken liquid that was in a ditch and I've floated it out into somebody's yard, into somebody's garage, into somebody's house, into a place of business. And now I have created a hot zone that went from a little ditch and the spot of the initial release all the way into surrounding areas. So the way we can prevent that from happening is we dam the product, we don't dam the water. That means that we have to have a little bit of science in our response. And it's not a lot. We just need to know what the specific gravity is. And we talked about the specific gravity when we talked about other chemical properties. So just as a quick review, when we're talking specific gravity, we are relating everything to water. Water is one. Don't care what one, just water is one. And if the chemical is a specific gravity less than one, or it's under one, we'll get into that a little bit, it's gonna float. If the specific gravity of the chemical is more than one, or it's over one, it's going to sink. The chemical will float in the water. If it's less than one, the chemical will sink in the water if it's more or over one. Now let's talk about damming. If I have water and I have a chemical leaking into the water that I need to stop the flow of, and I'm going to dam that chemical, if the chemical has a specific gravity of over one, I want to put an overflow dam in the runway where the water and the chemical are running through. Because if I put an overflow dam, that means that the water flows over the dam because the chemicals sank in the water. I put the dam down low, but not all the way to the height of the water. The chemical is under the water, it sank in the water. I can dam the bottom of the ditch Let the top of the ditch stay open. The water flows over. The chemical that's under the water, that sank in the water with a specific gravity over 1, stays down low. However, if I have a chemical that floats on water because its specific gravity is less than or under 1, I want an underflow dam. If the specific gravity is less than or under 1, the chemical is floating on the water. If I put a dam across the top of the water and let the water flow under the underflow dam, the water flows, the chemical is stopped because it's floating on the water. On damming, I may need to have additional dams downstream because once my dam depth has been reached by my pool of chemical, whether it's an underflow or an overflow, then I need to have another dam downstream. And that may be 2 or 3 or 4 dams. This is why if you look at news reports of oil spills or gasoline spills from a pipeline rupture in a river, you'll see they'll put booms that float on top of the water, and you'll see that they have some further downstream and further downstream. That is a textbook underflow dam. Under is less than 1 specific gravity, over is more than 1 specific gravity. Let's get off of damming. Let's talk about diking. Where I live in Texas, we have a Texas City dike. You can zoom up on Google Earth or whatever your map choice is, and you can see the Texas City dike. And the reason why that dike is there is multifold, but predominantly you'll notice that there's a river that runs from up by Houston. It runs out into Galveston Bay and it flows out. Long story short, it was eroding Galveston Island. If you look, you'll see a cut through the island from historical river flow and hurricane sweeping. And what they did was built a dike, a 5-mile long wall made out of granite blocks that had just dumped in the Galveston Bay to divert the flow of the river so it wouldn't hit right onto the island. It would deflect out into the channel that was already created and stay there. Let's talk about diking being a way that we can divert without stopping the flow of liquid that is flowing, actively moving. If we were to have a really big tank full of, pick the chemical or nastiest liquid you can think of, and you or I were to be over here and the tank was over there and the tank was getting ready to fall over, and we wouldn't have enough time to get away, and the tank is coming over. I have a dining room table right here. I would tump the table over and I'd stand behind or duck behind the table in an effort to get away from the wall of liquid coming. Here's the problem though. That tank is so big and that wall of stuff is so high and with so much velocity that if I were to try to stop that with a dam, dumping the table over and acting as a dam, it's just gonna hit and splash right over the top and I'm still gonna be covered in the liquid. If, however, when I dump the table over, I have the table at an angle, instead of trying to stop the liquid, I just change its direction away from me, away down the stairs. What's going to happen is the liquid will slam and slide off. It won't splash over nearly as much, if at all. A dike is designed not to stop the flow of the liquid. It is only to change the direction so that we can protect something that is in that area. There's a school, there's an electrical or telecommunications box, and we need to change the flow. There's a storm drain, and we need to change the flow away from this location. We will dike the liquid. It's not going to stop the flow. It is going to protect that space from the effects of the liquid. Now, if I need to downstream further, stop that flow, which I do, and we can contain it in an area safely away from any life or any property that we have to protect, what we're going to do is we're going to build a wall all the way around, a retention wall. You may have seen retention ponds for stormwater runoff. You may have seen a spill where you pour your absorbent material, your Diking material, but in a complete circle around or a perimeter around the product. We are retaining that product. That is another defensive control technique. If I have an 18-wheeler, it's stationary, it's leaking, I'll stick a container that can collect the leak. If the container is not sufficient because it's thousands of gallons and we can't stop the leak because we're defensive control, we're going to put a perimeter of some form of inert material around the entirety of that spill, possibly around the entirety of the truck. If you've ever seen a large tank farm and they have the dirt walls around that tank or those tanks, that's retention, pre-planned. The fourth manner of defensive control that we as responders can do to the operations level is dispersion. And you've probably already done dispersion many times. Every time I sweep a floor up, I use my dustpan, I dump all this stuff, and I'll sweep 4, 5, 6 times. There's never been a time that I've been able to get every little tiny bit of dust up without using a vacuum cleaner. And if I don't have a vacuum cleaner available, quick broom sweep, it disperses so that it's not visible, it's not there. We'll talk about that not visible, not there a little bit more when we get into a couple further down on our list. But for all intents and purposes, if I can disperse the material to a below dangerous level, I have effectively defended the life and property in the area from the effects of that release. That's the best example that I can think of for what dispersion is. If I don't see it, it's not dirty, it's clean, we're good. Same thing with the hazardous materials. If I can disperse the material enough, you may have dispersed material when you used a solid fertilizer for your yard and you used a spreader to disperse that material. You don't have a big pile of fertilizer in one area burning your grass. You have fertilizer throughout the area, feeding the grass. Let's talk about the fifth and sixth. We're going to talk about them almost simultaneously because they're so very close. Number 5 is absorption. I love to do and then you would say SpongeBob SquarePants because we all hopefully either grew up with or had kids that grew up with SpongeBob and know that absorption, ab with a B, is a sponge absorbing, soaking up a liquid. Absorption, I'm soaking up. I'm using some form of an absorbent like hay or peat moss or something that will act like a sponge and physically soak up the material, where defensive control technique number 6, adsorption with a D, like I'm adding a layer. Here's what we do. I go and I take a nitrile glove, I put my hand in a bucket of paint. And then I go and I wipe my hand off on that wall. And I keep doing that over and over and over. Eventually, my bucket of paint is empty. My wall is hopefully an artwork of masterpiece. My glove comes off. It has not absorbed anything. It is still got paint on it, though. My hand has not absorbed anything. nor has it added anything because I wore my protective clothing, my PPE. But what I did was I added a layer of paint to that wall, and I took all of the paint from this container, and it is now empty. When we adsorb something, it's not soaking it up, it's being coated. This is when surface area is our favorite best friend. If I were to use inert clay, I'm not gonna say kitty litter, but that's what a lot of departments use. I'm not gonna say absorball because that doesn't absorb, it adsorbs, but they have a B, I don't know why. If I have those little granules, they have a lot of surface area. But if I grind those granules with the back of a broom instead of the bristles of the broom, and I turn them into dust, the surface area exponentially increases to be coated. And so you can utilize a single 50-pound bag if you grind it into dust with your broom back instead of broom bristles and not have as much to dispose of as you would if you just brushed it around the spill. But absorption with a B, as in SpongeBob, soaks up, just like SpongeBob soaks up. Adsorption with a D, coats. You added a layer of material to whatever your adsorbent was. Number 7, I told you earlier that we would talk about if I don't see it, it's clean, it's not there. If I get it below a dangerous level or threshold, then we're safe. We've protected life and property. Number 7 is dilution. Dilution is just that. I'm gonna take this level of concentrated liquid and I'm gonna add something to it, usually water, to dilute the levels. An example that you may be familiar with, and if you are, I'm sorry that this has happened in your life. Alcohol is able to be diluted in water. And so unscrupulous vendors or purveyors of alcoholic beverages may use watered down booze. When you buy your drink, it's watered down. The reason why you don't want to have your on the rocks and drink it slowly is because as the ice melts, it waters down your drink. Dilution is taking a concentrate, adding water to it, it all becomes watered down, and keep adding water until there's so little of the original concentrated material spread out in the liquid that it's non-detectable, it's non-dangerous. An example that I use in addition to the alcohol one, I have the best dog in the world. Her name is Bella. Bella is phenomenal, but Bella has a problem with her digestive tract making the most toxic excrement on the planet. If you're dying of thirst, and I got you a bottle of water, and that bottle of water had one Bella turd in it, you're not drinking the water. I don't care if you're dying of thirst. I said, you know what? That's not right of me. I take a 5-gallon bucket, more water than one little 16.9 fluid ounce bottle. Same Bella turd is in that bucket of water. You're still not drinking the water. I don't know what's wrong with my head. 55-gallon drum of water. One Bella turd, same size. You saw the turd. You're not drinking the water. I meant to say one of those big inflatable above ground pools. You saw a Bella turd floating in the middle of that pool. You're probably not going to drink that water. I'm not. I meant an Olympic size swimming pool. No chlorine. Chlorine kills all the germs, but you got drinking water. Chlorine, I don't want to kill you. So you see the Bella turd in the middle of that pool. You drinking that water? At some point, you may decide, you know what? That's enough water. The turd's far enough away. That's what dilution is. Now, Along those same lines, defensive control technique number 8 is dissolution. Dissolution is when I take a solute, something solid or liquid, and a solvent, a liquid, and I dissolve the solute in the solvent. I take my powder, I take my liquidy gel, and I dissolve it with water. You may have drank the Kool-Aid once in your life where you made the Kool-Aid out of a package. I apologize, Kool-Aid. You may have had a flavored drink that was a powder in a packet. You dissolved that powdered drink mix into water, probably added sugar, unless you had the sugar-free, stirred it all together. You don't see the powder in the bottom. You drink it. You have taken a solid and dissolved it or utilized dissolution. In defensive control technique number 9, we utilize diversion. Diversion is what we did with Diking, with the liquid flow. We changed its direction. With diversion, I'm gonna change the direction of movement of this product. But I'm using something like an airboat to blow wind. So this chlorine cloud that's approaching this elementary school that we have shelter in place going on, it diverts that cloud away from the school. It didn't stop the cloud. I wasn't able to disperse the cloud. We'll talk about vapor dispersion next, but I was able to keep those kids safe. I was able to keep that house or neighborhood safe. I was able to keep whatever it was by changing the direction of that cloud coming. By diverting it, we were able to protect life and property. I told you we would talk about vapor dispersion next. I went in for my first fire department job interview. Fire chief loved it, loved everything I said. Was going to HR to offer me a job. I had eaten breakfast tacos. You know where I'm going with this. And hopefully that didn't show up on the video. If you've ever had tummy bubbles and you finally had freedom, the exquisite release, oh no, death for anyone who comes into this room. I immediately started using my folder for my resume to try to fan or disperse to below noticeable thresholds. Joking. Dirty fire department crude humor. I apologize. I shouldn't have used that. Let's use a different vapor dispersion. We have you fill in the blank of your product smell. We need to get the threshold down, so we're gonna dilute that threshold by getting more air into the space. We have a confined space. We use positive pressure ventilation to fill that space with positive pressured air. It blows anything out, or at least knocks it down to a non-dangerous threshold. We have a cloud of something coming towards an area, but the airflow, the wind is so negligible that if we crank that airboat fan, or we can't crank our PPVs up, and we blow extra air into the cloud, it disperses the cloud. Let's talk about vapor suppression though. This is vapor suppression. I don't do hazmat, I'm a fireman. Okay, what do you do when there's a car fire and there's gasoline leaking? Well, I'll throw foam on it to blanket that gasoline so that it doesn't produce vapors. Because gasoline liquid doesn't burn, it's the gasoline vapors that burn. I'm going to suppress that vapor generation by putting a blanket of foam on it. You just did hazmat. Thank you, firefighters. That's what we do. Every call we ever go on is a hazmat call. But vapor suppression with foam or some other product for some other vapor prevention, the one that we utilize most is going to be foam. That's what we're all about. Defensive control technique number 12 is ventilation. Again, a fire crew, you get your truckie, you get up on the roof, you cut a hole. Why did you cut a hole? so that we can get all the hot gases and all the other toxic byproducts of combustion out of that space, make it more tenable for the crew inside, make it more tenable for the potential victims inside. We get the heat and we get the poisons out because we ventilated. Ventilated through the roof for vertical, ventilate through windows with horizontal. Regardless, we ventilate. There's ventilation for other stuff. When you experience having to bomb a house with flea bombs, roach bombs, whatever bug bombs, the instructions say at the end, after you've evacuated the structure and all the bombs are going off, when they've gone down, you go back in and you open up all the windows and you turn on all the AC and turn on all your fans and you leave again so the house can ventilate. The same process in hazmat ventilation. The 13th and last defensive control technique that we're going to talk about today is utilizing a remote shutoff. As a defensive control, I can stop the flow of product without ever going to it with a remote shutoff. We have those in refineries and the pipe racks. You're going to need to know, though, with pipe racks, and we have those with pipelines crisscrossing the country. Everywhere that you have pipelines, somewhere up and down flow is a shutoff. With those two situations, with pipe racks in industrial facilities, with pipelines, we, the responders, do not turn those remote valves off until we are instructed to do so by the operators. That's why on the pipelines, there are markers that tell you the 24/7 contact, emergency contact number. So you can call them and let them know, hey, this pipeline that is carrying whatever the product that's on that marker says at this location is leaking. We need you to shut off the pumps and let us know when to close it down because it's becoming a very large hot zone. Same thing with the industry with the pipe racks. We don't turn off a valve until the operator shut off the pump. The problem with turning off a valve at a pipeline or a pipe rack before the pump is shut off is that now that pressure finds the next weakest link in that pipe rack or pipeline, and now your hot zone is here and wherever that weak link is upstream. And now you've got 2 hot zones or 3 or 5 or however many weak links it found because we shut off that remote shut off. We do use those when we are instructed by the operator. A place that we don't have to worry about that is on an MC306, the big gasoline, diesel hauling tank trucks. On an MC307, the milk trucks, you pick the horseshoe or the round, non-heavy insulated 307s that we talked about in previous videos. On the MC331, the great big propane or the bobtail propane tanks, we don't have to worry about calling, is it safe for me? If we've got a leaker, we pull the remote handle, it shuts off the valves, no more leak. Hopefully, we don't have to worry about the hot zone getting any bigger as long as it's not being carried by the wind or by gravity somewhere else. The last place that we would find a remote shutoff that we are going to have common calls to, even if we're off duty, we find ourselves at a gas store, a gas station, a filling station, whatever you regionally call a place that you're going to fill a vehicle with fuel. They're going to have a red button, a red switch, someplace it's going to be labeled emergency shutoff. Don't have to wait for them to tell us, hey, go shut it off. If we see something spilling, pouring out, push the button, flip the switch. It kills the power to the pumps, just like we're hoping that the pipeline or pipe rack industrial operators are going to do for us so that we can close that valve. So we don't have to worry about the valve. Pumps off, it's done. Those are the 13 common defensive control techniques that we as emergency hazmat operations responders are going to be able to utilize. I'm Glenn Trahan. If you want to give the video a like, if you want to be a subscriber, love to have you on board, but feel free to just come back, share the video with your friends. Thanks for all your help, and stay safe out there.